Hi, my name is Amy-Paige, and this is my commemorative speech about Catullus and the Neoteric Revolution. Poetae novi is the Latin term coined by Cicero that refers to the innovative tendencies of his day, the modern poetic taste that develops and becomes prominent in the 1st century BC and that marks a decisive turn in the history of Latin literature. Cicero held great disdain for these modern poets, or cantores euphorius, another coined term stemmed by Cicero meaning singers of euphorion. With this term, he intended to stigmatize that the new writers on the literary scene had irreverently rejected national tradition in order to pursue an avant-garde poetic ideal. Catullus' Neoteric style, however, developed through years of his own experiments with the Hellenizing style of poetry and observation of other poets experimenting in new ways. Catullus, though he was a pioneer, did have to learn from previous poets before he or the Neoteric Revolution would actually be a success. The pre-Neoteric poet, prominent figure, Quintus Latutus Catullus, not the actual Catullus that started the Neoteric Revolution, but the one that came before him, was an author of historical and autobiographical works. An orator of elegance and refined diction, Catullus, a man who enjoyed a vast array of culture and was open to philosophy, introduced poetry epigrams of Greek type into Latin poetry, which he had adapted from Hellenistic styles. A group of writers began to follow suit who were open to more new revolutionary way styles of poetry and that actually seemed to enjoy the poetry that he showed as he was developing his poems and developing the new style. He focused more on the entertainment for readers rather than what the old poets did, which was really focus on the tradition of the country and of the republic. The Neoteric generation was then born, with Labius being the intermediate link from pre-Neoteric poets to the Neoteric. He elaborated his models with greater originality, preferring erotic mythological subjects that would become so popular in later Latin literature, trying out new possibilities of expression. This was true for all Neoteric poets, who no longer stuck to the Hellenistic model they once did. Rather, they brought originality and personality into their poems. Gaius Valerius Catullus, whom would later be one of the greatest Neoteric poems and was actually the one who started the Neoteric Revolution, was born at Verona to a well-to-do family. Later on in life, while in Rome, he knew and associated with prominent people in politics and literature, from the famous orator Hortensius Hortalus to Gaius Memmius. This is also where he developed a relationship with Clodia, who would later be seen in his poems as his lover Lesbia. Catullus, a prolific poet, wrote 116 poems that were collected in a liber that is customarily divided, based on meter, into 3 sections. The composition of the Catullan liber is controversial, though. Some do believe that Catullus did it himself, but many believe that it was done after his death, when a posthumous edition of his poems were prepared. It has to be assumed, though, that the libellus dedicated by Catullus to Cornelius Nepos, a man who appeared in many of his poems under a different name, and basically Catullus mocked him, did not match exactly to the extant liber, but only made up some part of it. The Neoteric Revolution, of which Catullus was a prominent figure, occurred at a time of crisis for the Republic. Old moral and political values began to crumble, and people began to be attracted to a life devoted to culture, society, friendship, poetry, and love. Literary activity no longer followed or focused upon epic and tragedy, the genres that traditionally spoke for the state and its values, but rather towards lyrical and personal poetry and ideals, which is suitable for embracing and expressing the small events of private life. The aim of recovering intimate space, private feelings, and most importantly love, is helped in part by Catullus's poetry. For Neoterics, love is the central emotion of life. It becomes the central theme of their poetry and helps to give a new form of life. His poems were all about self-expression and free thought. Catullus truly was a mastermind of the Neoteric Revolution in poetry, and to this day, if it was not for him, we would not have that for us to study.